Welcome back to Ty and That Guy. I'm Wes Chatham. Wes Chatham, and I'm here with my good buddy, not Ty Frank. Ty Frank is doing his Jack Kerouacking around the country. He will be here soon, and we will make a lot of podcasts when he get here. But I am with one of my dearest friends. I've known him for a very long time. His name is Evan Turner, and he was a suit for many years. He was a movie executive, and now he's a fantastic, talented feature film writer. And him and I connected early on through our love of movies, all things genre. And I have to say this, and the listeners are not going to believe this. Evan Turner might be the biggest fan of Die Hard, even bigger than Ty and me, because he named his son after Bruce Willis, after the character in Die Hard, McClane. So, welcome, Evan Turner.
Thank you, buddy. It's an honor to be here. I wish I had a signature sound like your microphone suck there. You need to prepare me a little bit. Like I need to know I need these things, but it's an honor to be here. If my wife listens, we did not name my son after John McClane. Wink, wink. We named him after John McClane. Absolutely, 100%.
I mean, I remember you floated that name to me, and I was like, so pissed because I have two sons, and I was like, I did not think of that. He was ahead of me. So when we do
you're like, if you don't use it, I remember we were at the Star Wars, wasn't that the Empire Strikes Back?
Oh yeah, I'm changing
the Hollywood Bowl with John Williams. You're like, dude, if you don't use that name, just so you know, I'm having another kid, and I will use that name.
No, I will rename one of my kids. I'm not gonna have another kid. I'll rename it. But it was the original Star Wars, the John Williams that we went to. You invited me to. That was fucking awesome. So Evan and I have been friends for a long time. We connected in our love of movies. But just so you know, at the end of the podcast, we do related to whatever we're talking about in the moment. We will have a top five, like our top five. Today will probably be our top five greatest Michael Mann movies. Joseph in the Patreon has kind of put it together. But we always find, so the 0 spot is always occupied by Die Hard. And we always find a way to make like the best romantic comedy or the best, it's like we'll find a way that Die Hard will
you guys covered Die Hard, right? There's a reason we're not doing Die Hard today. It's already, you've covered it.
Oh yeah, we did a live viewing of Die Hard. We did do we have a guest when we did any of the times we did Die Hard, Joseph?
I'm trying to think back if we've done an actual deep dive of Die Hard now. I mean, obviously we did the viewing. But Die Hard always finds a way.
We did it as the Christmas movie.
Yeah, we did it as the Christmas movie.
I mean, should I be offended? Why wasn't I the first one called?
The reason I asked is if we had a guest on, because I don't imagine I would have a guest if that wasn't you to do Die Hard. So anyway, listeners,
unless you're going to tell me it was Reginald Vell Johnson or something like that, then I would accept. And I would accept. Okay, you know, if you can get Argyle for that, God bless you.
So we got a big task ahead of us. This might have to be two-parter. You know, Joseph tries to keep us down to an hour because he has to edit this beast. But for some reason, we took on heat today. As I rewatched this and kind of started thinking about it, I'm like, Jesus Christ, like this is a two-parter, or this could be a 3 or 4 hour episode. So I think what you and I will do today is like focus on, you know, major moments and focus on major characters, kind of going through it. Usually we'll go through and like, you know, act one and just kind of really break it down and find out what makes something special, why it works, why it's like, why do we love it so much, and kind of identify that. But this one is so big, you know, we're just going to kind of do the greatest hits version of this thing. But what I'm curious about is, when was the first time you saw Heat? What did you think about it? And how did your perception change over time?
I mean, I don't remember the first time I saw it, but I just love this movie so much. I mean, before it, I was such a big Melissa McCarthy fan and Sandra Bullock, and then them coming together. I was wondering if I could get you on that. That's the only thing I kind of have half written for this podcast. That's it. And I got to laugh. All right. I win.
I bet Joseph was shitting his pants. I bet Joseph was like, God damn it.
I saw this movie when it came out. I didn't see it in a theater, so it must have been like a rental. or something like that. And I always liked it, and I've watched it over the years. And then I watched it I'd watched it before you brought it up to me as like, hey, let's do Heat, as just a big coincidence. And then I watched it one more time since you brought it up. And I liked it back then just as a pretty young person and young movie viewer. I liked it just in that way, a sort of more blank canvas, dumb movie viewer likes a movie. Like, it was just a big action movie to me. It just played as a big action movie where I could have told you about like the awesome, iconic bank getaway, and how iconic it is and how well shot it is and how cool it is, or like the great shot of the armored truck in the beginning bearing down on the armored truck, like just those great visuals and the great action. And, probably a little bit about the De Niro, Pacino, just acting tutorial. Like, all that stuff stood out the first time, but it just would have played, I guess, to me as kind of an action movie is the genre I would have more put it in. And the more I watch it, the more levels it takes on. Like, it started to take on levels about the thematics of good and bad, and, De Niro and Pacino, being two sides of the same coin, that one is the good guy cop and one's the bad guy, but they're incredibly similar. And the movie does such a good job showing you how similar they are, whether it's, that they both kind of check the chambers of their guns and private moments in elevators, or just kind of cross-cutting their looks in a way. They're both they were both military guys. Like, it's so well constructed with them as, two versions of the same guy, who both are doing the only job they've ever wanted to do, who don't see themselves doing anything different. So that started it grew from action movie to, oh, there's a deeper thematic at play. And then the last one that really just started to come in was something I hadn't seen before. It was a little bit more structural, a little bit more of like a writer thing that I was like, oh, wow, this is actually fantastically interesting, which is sort of how many plots it has going at the same time, like what it's juggling. Like that De Niro is dealing with Wayne Grow, this sort of rogue agent from their first mission who goes rogue, and now they've got to worry about him. And then the bearer bonds that they try to sell back to Van Zandt, who now tries to kill them, and they try to kill him, and now they've got to kill him. So they've got all these balls in the air, right? All these things are going on, multiple jobs. And then, like, even this last time, I was like, why do they show Pacino, Hannah, when he finds the dead prostitute, right? And I'm like, why are we here? And I'm like, oh, this is another subplot of his. Like, he also has multiple balls in the air where, like, we know he's the man in charge of this case of busting this unit, this troop of criminals. But now he's also on this other case, which is Wayne Grow's trail. So, like, the interconnectivity of these many, many, many plots, and that includes the Dennis Haysbert stuff.
Oh, God.
Which really is so interesting, and just kind of like, you don't know why you're watching it for 2/3 of the movie, right? It's this heavily plotted movie that's cutting back and forth between these two guys and what they're doing and tracking each other and finding out about each other. And you're seeing these scenes of like a guy that in a relationship that you don't know anything about, and you don't know where this fits in the story. And then, of course, it comes to fit in. And I do have questions. I'm curious if you understand things better than I do, because I do have questions about how that comes in. But I guess the most recent level was, the complexity of this plot, the intricacy of this plot, and how it keeps coming together, interconnecting. So it really, it just felt a bit like a masterclass on structuring a movie really intricately. One might argue over intricately. There are some things I definitely want to ask your feelings on and talk about, of like, should these have been cut? Is it right that it's in the movie? But it's just so well done on that level. So I really have kind of astonishingly over, whatever it's been, 3 decades, found new ways to enjoy this movie, from the most simple to now kind of the most complicated.
What's interesting, this speaks to everything you just mentioned. Michael Mann has very vocally talked about this movie after it came out, and he basically said, I didn't see this as a crime genre. I don't really look at things within genre. And he said, what I was more interested in is the collision of all these different complex people and thematically who all are pursuing something or so obsessive of something that the private life or the love that they have in their life kind of corrodes around them. They all have like this addiction where Al Pacino is addicted to the hunt, addicted to catching the guy. And Neil McCauley is addicted to the score. Val Kilmer is addicted to Charlene. And
gambling.
And gambling. Yep. And so it's like this collision with all these different, it's a highly complex, structured genre of these collisions, these complex characters. That is, in how you just described is perfect. And for me, so when I first came across this movie, I remember when I was young, I always wanted to work on the flight deck of carriers. And one of my best friends, Greg Harvey, he moved to Jacksonville, and his brother lived in Jacksonville, and his brother was stationed on a carrier. And they were doing this day where they would let dependents come on, and they would take the carrier out, and we get to watch the jets take off and land on the carriers. It's like this special thing. And so I was like so stoked to go do this. So we go there, and we're going to go have a day on the carrier. And I was in his office as we're waiting to go out and watch the jets take off, and Heat was on. And I'd never seen it. I didn't know anything about it. And I started watching Heat, and I remember like getting to the shootout scene because we started in the middle somewhere, and I remember I was like, I haven't seen anything like this on film. And I was so enthralled that by the time it was time to go watch the jets, I didn't want to leave the movie. I was so in it. And so it was a movie that I never really like thought to get my hands on it and watch it. It would just be on, and I'd be like, oh, that's that movie. And I would watch it. And so I would just put it together, bits and pieces over the years. And my initial reaction to it was probably similar to you. Like I thought it was an action movie on another level. I am a Michael Mann fan because me and my stepdad used to love Miami Vice like back in the day. So Michael Mann, like he came in firing on all cylinders in my fandom. I thought Miami Vice was the coolest fucking thing. I still do. When I go back and watch clips and stuff from I don't even know. I couldn't even tell you a storyline from the thing, but I could tell you what John Johnson was wearing and how beautiful that hair was blowing in the Miami wind.
I too loved Miami Vice. Watched it with my mom. I'm sure she and I were watching for very different reasons, but we both
or the same reason.
Or the same reason, because like, look, I had honestly a T-shirt of like Don Johnson just singing. So he must have had like a David Hasselhoff, like, oh yeah, he had heartbeat, right? Yeah, heartbeat. Yeah, so it was. I loved him. I was like 9 years old, having a shitty linen suit that you would like push up the sleeves,
right?
To look like the Miami Vice look.
Hold on, did you have the Don Johnson shirt like at an age when it was ironic, or did you have it when you were 9?
When I was 9, when it was like. This is me and my mom, right? Like where it's like my mom knew I liked him. She must have seen the shirt and bought it for me. Like, hey, my son likes Don Johnson. And I think it was actually one of those early things where I like put it on and I'm like, I might be embarrassed because I don't know what this is saying about me. I don't know how other people are perceiving me wearing this Don Johnson shirt, because it definitely wasn't irony. It was like, no, I am a fan of this man, not necessarily as a singer, but boy, he's just so cool. And the the stubble and the cool suits, and
you kind of got some of that stubble right now. You kind of got the Don Johnson stubble right now.
Yeah. I mean, all the guys I loved had it, so that's a good reason. It's a good reason not to shave.
So I have grown to the point where I am now, where I do think it's a classic. I think it is a masterpiece. But it took me a while to get there, and what bumped me, and we're going to go in depth, in this later. But what really bumped me. And I love Al Pacino. I think he's one of the greats, and I think he's one of my favorite actors of all time. This performance bumped me a little bit, and the chemistry that he had with his wife, I didn't really feel that. I didn't believe that. The blow dry hair thing, and the gum chewing, and the greatest, a lot of that stuff. Initially, it just kind of kept me. I was so much more interested in Neil McCauley and Val Kilmer and the life of the thieves and everything. And then the more I keep watching, and the more I have greater appreciation, the more it does become less a crime film and more about this collision of all these complex personalities. And the way that Michael Mann captures the loneliness of Los Angeles. When I first moved to Los Angeles, I didn't know anybody. And I remember I was working for like a dye house in like the valley somewhere. And the boss let me live his daughter went off to college, so her house was like abandoned for 3 months, and like I lived in that house. And so, you know, like like the loneliness of not knowing anybody and that feeling of LA and all of these characters, it always brings me back to that moment because everybody's so lonely. Everybody's so, you know, reaching out.
By the way, the first shots of this movie establish that in such an incredible way. Just so beautifully shot. The train coming into the station as De Niro gets off in this really potentially overcomplicated way of which he's getting into the hospital to steal the ambulance. I don't know if you noticed those, but it's like sort of over credits, but it's just this train coming in and you see the twinkling lights of LA behind. You're definitely getting, not, you know, having lived in LA for 17 years, like that's not really the LA I knew, but it is the, you know, it's a certain kind of lonely and isolated Los Angeles, I would say, in a way.
Well, what's interesting is you say it's not the LA I knew. That is the first LA that I met because I worked for this dye house and I was constantly driving in downtown LA, like the garment industry. I was in school at the time, so I'd have to go down to Huntington Beach. I was driving back and forth. So a lot of like the train and certain places in the valley or downtown LA or whatever, like that was where I was working. I was driving all around those areas. So watching this movie, it always takes me back to those things because you do get to a point in LA where you just kind of focus on your places, your friends, where you go, and you don't, there's like the city's so massive and there's so much about the city that you can't know. And Michael Mann is one of those directors like a James Cameron or Christopher Nolan who is a genius in storytelling and characterization, but also a genius in the technical side. And there's the rare directors like that. Like I always talk about Kubrick, and I think Kubrick is a genius in many ways, but there's a sort of lifelessness in his films. Like there's a sort of like it's absent of passion. But anyway, so Michael Mann was so obsessed, he became friends with this guy named Chuck Adamson. And Chuck Adamson was in the 60s in Chicago, was pursuing the real life Neil McCauley. And the diner scene was based off this relationship because as he was pursuing them, he started to have a bit of a respect because Neil McCauley was such a professional and he was so good at his job, and he ended up respecting him. And there was a moment where they almost had a shootout in a parking lot, and Addison just said, "Hey, do you want to go get a cup of coffee?" He said, "Yeah, let's go get a cup of coffee." They sit down in the diner and basically have this great conversation and an intimacy that only strangers can have. And they talk about their lives. They talk about, you know, their challenges and their careers. And they end it with saying, you know, I do respect you. And, you know, I do think we have a connection. But when it comes time to put each other down, I won't hesitate putting you down. And so that seed was so fascinating to Mann. That seed of that idea is what spawned the whole Heat universe, because there's that original movie, LA Takedown. I don't know if did you see LA Takedown?
I have not seen it, no.
So basically, the original version of Heat, when Michael Mann started getting heat in TV, they were going to allow him to do whatever, and he decided to do the original version of Heat, and it was like 40% of what ended up being the ultimate script, and it was a movie called LA Takedown, and it's so kind of weird to watch because you see the TV version of Heat, you see the TV actors of Heat. And I say this all the time when people are, you know, talking about acting and the process of acting. I say, if you want to have an understanding of levels between actors, the diner scene, there's a scene in LA Takedown that is word from word the diner scene in Heat. So if you YouTube it and you watch back to back, you watch the scene with the actors when Michael Mann first did LA Takedown, then you finish that, then you go to YouTube and you watch the original or the new diner scene with De Niro and Heat, and you see why De Niro is De Niro and Pacino is Pacino, because that scene ends up becoming a whole different, it's on a different planet. It's a different movie. The way that you understand them, the feel them, and all the words and everything is the exact same. And it's like, you know, the great thing about being in acting class is you can see the same people doing the same scenes over and over and over. And you see somebody like a De Niro and Pacino, and it's like, oh my God, this is why they're so great.
I'm a little worried that we're blowing our load coming to this scene so early. But this is a tremendous scene. I mean, this is the iconic scene. This is what, you know, this and the bank robbery, I would say, are what people remember. You know, one and two on the Family Feud top 5 things, right? in some order. I'd be curious. I think this would be number one. By the way, shot at Kate Manalini. Ever eat at Kate Manalini?
I know. I've always heard about, you got to go Kate Manalini's where they shoot Heat and everything. They closed that, right?
It's closed now. It's a bummer. I ate there many, many times, and they had a big mural up of a picture from the movie, and it always felt special, and just that like geek who grew up loving movies and be sitting in the place where that scene happened.
By the way, Evan, don't worry about blowing your load.
I got more loads.
Blow as many loads as you want.
Let's blow some loads.
I think because like this time was going to fly by so fast. And I will say, Evan, I think what's interesting about starting with this scene is because this is the seed of the thing that Michael Mann has been fascinated with, and it reverberates throughout the whole thing.
I will also say, per IMDb trivia at least, this was the scene that basically locked in De Niro, that had him say yes, was the notion of having this face-to-face with Pacino. And Pacino's idea on the scene was that they should not rehearse it, that these two people are strangers.
That's De Niro's. Okay.
Yeah. Good correction. That it should not be a rehearsed scene, so it was an unrehearsed scene, which sort of makes it all the more fantastic. I'll also agree with a point you made earlier that I think on that, we talked about how it's evolved for you, but on the early watches of this movie for me, I feel like Pacino was a little bit of what I inelegantly, perhaps as a non-actor, called like scenery chewing. Like he struck me as a little bit perhaps overacting, scenery chewing, in a way that has toned down. Like I guess I appreciate it a little more now. I like their.
And what you mean, let me clarify. And what you mean by scenery chewing is when you have a lot of energy and that energy doesn't have a point. It doesn't have a focus. It's not connected to the point of the scene. So the reason that you're in that scene, the reason you're in the scene and their scene is there's something you're there to achieve. There's something you're there to want. And so when there is a energy that's undirected because it's just there and it's kind of general is the death of any performance. And so if it's general energy, and I'm not saying, but that's what chewing the scenery means. I'm not saying this is what Pacino was doing. I was just saying what that means.
Right. And it's sort of, yes, it's less subdued. It feels less nuanced to me. I always kind of do I took one acting class in college and was really bad at it. So I'm people in glass houses should certainly not throw stones at Al Pacino, who is an incredible actor and in so many movies I love.
We're talking about
let me judge Al Pacino.
But I don't know what it's like saying like, Jordan, man, like he just
Jordan, he missed that shot.
He missed the jump shot.
Like what the fuck was that guy? Was dropped. Like could he not go to his left? I don't understand.
How fucking dare us? Like even say anything. But what was your initial thing about Pacino when you were watching that? Like what did you feel about it?
I guess I just I had a theory, and I think I've outgrown the theory, but I had a theory that like the best acting was more restrained. That's sort of what De Niro is doing in that scene was the acting I had a stronger response to, that it was kind of like showing less, and that when it involved more physicality, more volume, more things that I don't think you really see in real life in your many interactions with people, that it isn't naturalistic. And it felt almost crutch to me. It felt like a crutch to be able to be like, oh, I'm going to go big. I'm going to say something crazy, as opposed to something you might see in the real world. And I think my theory was wrong. Not Al Pacino was wrong. Surprise, surprise.
Give me all you got.
The big ass one apparently was a total ad lib that Shock Tank Azaria. And like his response is like, what the fuck is this guy doing here?
She got a great ass.
I also read somewhere that, I don't know if it was a draft or if it ever made the movie. I did watch some deleted scenes from this that are available. I don't know if you've watched those, but I did read somewhere that the character was at one point addicted to cocaine.
Yeah. So that's what I was trying to get to.
Which explains a lot, right?
Yeah, so I actually, there's an interview where Christopher Nolan is interviewing De Niro, Michael Mann, and Al Pacino. First of all, Al Pacino was really reserved, very focused, and we wanted to be the other of that, the inverse of that. And what we created as a backstory is that Vincent Hanna was addicted to cocaine. And he was like, so I'm constantly chipping cocaine throughout the movie. And there was even a scene where you see him doing cocaine. So Michael Mann, after, realized, oh, that could be a bit distracting. So he cut out all evidence of the cocaine. And then Pacino was like, but I'm fucking like acting like a cokehead the whole time. Yeah. And so now when I went back and rewatched it, I'm like, oh, it's actually really good. So when the scene when he's with when they're at the pit bull fighting arena and he sits down and he goes, give me all you got. Give me all you got. He said he was coked up, but also how to get information is you disorient. You do shit that they can't understand. You know, you shock them, you get them out of their thing, and then you get information because they study with interrogators for so long. And so then, you know, like this is a tale of me being like, how dare I ever say anything negative about Pacino, because the motherfucker was on cocaine the whole time. And you go back and watch and you're like, oh my God, it makes so much sense. And you understand.
Yeah. And even actually the scene where he's in the helicopter surveying De Niro, and then he's like, you know, get me down. I'm going to follow him. When he gets in that car and he's cruising down the highway, definitely Michael Mann does there's like blurred, you know, motion blur. Something is going on that is definitely indicating like this guy is high. Like he's moving, he's weaving around cars, but there's that. I've never done cocaine, so I don't know how it feels.
Your mom's not going to listen to this, Evan.
Well, at this point, I'm definitely going to make sure she doesn't.
You're a movie exec in Hollywood. Get out of here.
So not having done cocaine, I don't know, but I imagine it feels something like the way he's driving, where there's like this kind of clarity to it, but at the same time, in a lack of clarity, but he's just moving around. He's hyper focused. I was like, yeah, this character is fucking on cocaine. And I think Michael Mann is trying to tell you that without obviously it being in the story.
And that's a good observation that you make there, because I read in that scene in particular, Michael Mann talks about like what his drugs are, cocaine and the hunt. And so when he's tracking him down with that car, he's just juiced out of his mind. It's everything, you know, it's like all drugs coming together. But by the way, since you bring that up, I mean, he's a lieutenant. Like what kind of power does a fucking lieutenant have where he can just commandeer a helicopter and then he's like, all right, lay me down, and then commandeer a car and then do 120 on the highway, pull him over, and then go to the fucking diner? Like, is there a report after the fact like, hey, so, okay, you got to sign out for all the fuel for the helicopter in the car, and what do we achieve in that? He's like, I just went to coffee with him. You know, it's like, motherfucker, like you went to, you know.
It is a fair question. That's definitely like I hand wave that away as it's a special unit. What do you want? These they take down big criminals. You know, they took down that guy in Chicago. He was serious business. So you know, he gets the helicopter. He gets use of the helicopter.
But how this movie grows, and I think also too, it's a lesson in like humility, because how this movie grows to me, and we'll probably get to all the scenes and all the storylines that you feel at first. Like, is the Natalie Portman scene necessary in this? Like, his marriage is falling apart. She's fucking a guy in front of him. Like, do we need to have? But when you keep going back and watching it, you realize how important every single moment. And you even brought up the murder of the prostitute and him being there, because it is giving a concrete visualization of what he's talking about to his wife and the things of all times, like the violence and the things that he has to endure to do his job and why his private life is suffering. So the more I've watched this movie, the more it grows in my esteem, and like to the point where I'm a massive fan. And the Pacino's performance over time, once I found out the cocaine, this is the first time I rewatched it with the cocaine influence, and I'm like, oh God, this makes so much sense. You watched this
on cocaine?
I wanted to really connect spiritually with Pacino.
Yeah, I just want to go back to the Natalie Portman mention you made, because that definitely is for me, and she's wonderful in the movie. I mean, zero surprise. Obviously, she was incredible in The Professional, and you know, there was never a moment you didn't know a huge career was coming, but she's definitely the one that I would, of anything, of this many, many subplots, put on the chopping block. Certainly, like it building to a suicide. I mean, I have both like a little, you know, you mentioned the logic of the helicopter, which never occurred to me, but I did have a logic of, all right, he and his wife just split. She knows where he's staying. She was able to get into his hotel room. Like I did kind of ask those questions, but I think it's just, it really comes at a strange time in the movie. I mean, you're in Act 3, I think, right? I think structurally, the bank heist going bad is Act 2, and there's still so much movie to go. In like spending that time with like, part of this is, Natalie Portman's suicide attempt and him dealing with that and it bringing him back, maybe or maybe not, with his wife, and probably not. It sort of seems like is what they're saying. I respect it because it's so ambitious and it's kind of the opposite of what a lot of movie making is now. I think look, Michael Mann would probably get to do what Michael Mann wants to do now. So maybe that's how it happened then as well.
I feel like he had way more juice then than he does now. I think that was at the apex of Michael Mann. I mean, to shoot at fucking LAX, to shoot in downtown, to do a shootout with full load ammo in downtown LA, that's peak flexing your power in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I guess I just think that I respect it, and yet part of me thinks maybe it's a flaw, that it's a storyline too many. Although I can probably intellectualize like how it creates thematic overlap of who cares about who, and it circles back around to kind of his marriage and whatnot. It always feels a little out of place more than anything else for me, I guess, in the movie. That feels out of place.
Yeah. Besides all of the great De Niro performances that we know, that's obvious, that we always talk about, the two that are my favorite, not counting, The Godfather, Taxi Driver, all the obvious ones, are Midnight Run and Heat. This is my favorite De Niro in Heat and Midnight Run. I think he is so good in this movie. And, like the rewatchables do this thing, like who wins this movie? And I think it's hands down De Niro. And the work that he put into this character, in the sense, like, so Michael Mann was been obsessed with this for years. He was doing a movie called Jericho Mile, and he was shooting in Folsom Prison, and he got to know a lot of the prisoners there, and so a lot of these guys are based off that, and De Niro is based off the real life Neil McCauley, and Michael Mann kind of lists like the backstory of maybe what happened to McCauley and like how he developed this philosophy in life. And, him being in prison and going into the library and start to educate himself. And maybe he got into Marx and realized that all private property is stolen property. And so that kind of justifies what he's doing. But the honor among these thieves, whereas like the De Niro or the John Voight character, they're all based on people that Michael Mann knew in the past, that these thieves, and there was like an honor, there was a code that they lived by. And that's why whenever somebody like Waingrove comes in and violates that code, there's no tolerance for it. The real life Waingrove they found in Texas nailed to a shed nailed through his heart, attached to a shed. I'm sorry, Mexico. But what was so brilliant about De Niro is that there was a discipline and a strength that held back the need for human interaction, the human for connection. And when he violates his own code that he lays out, you never attach yourself to anything that you can't leave in 30 minutes flat. With Edie, when he meets her in the restaurant, and when he goes to her second time, that opens up the emotional floodgates. And that's when he allows rage to ultimately for him to make the fatal mistake of going back to get Waingrove. And I think it's just so brilliantly done. And the arc is so great. And, how great is that meet cute at the deli when they're sitting at the thing and she's like, hey, what are you reading? And he's like, why the fuck are you interested in what I'm reading? What I am?
Don't talk to me, bitch.
Don't talk to me. But you see the awkwardness of a man that's been in prison his whole life. Even when she finds out what he's doing, he's still like, the way he chases her down and like, he's like, it's going to be okay. Don't worry. Like this is not a man. This is the first real relationship that he's had. This is the first person that he's allowed into his life the way it is. And I just think he's brilliant in this.
So the question we are asking is who wins between Pacino, De Niro?
No. We were just kind of having a conversation about De Niro's arc and why I think he's so good in this. And I just mentioned...
Well, he both arcs and he doesn't. I mean, and that's kind of the great thing about it. I mean, both of them don't really arc. I'm not sure. I'm not sure they do. I mean, And the line I love going back to the diner is, and I just noticed it this time. He says it so perfectly where he goes, that's the discipline that, like you just have to be prepared. And he is prepared. Again, he leaves her in that car. He's violating in that he's not really violating. Look, he leaves her.
Definitely violating. No, and
he leaves her in the car. He makes the decision. You've got 30 seconds. What are you going to do?
But he realizes. So the De Niro at the beginning of the movie would never go after Wayne Grove. The De Niro at the end of the movie would go after Wayne Grove because he made the first violation, and that's with her. And at the end of the movie, when he looks at her face and he looks at Vincent Hanna, he knows it's over. He knows he broke his rules. He knows it's over. He takes off. He knows it's going to end bloody. And that's what's so powerful about the look they hold when in that look, he's like, I violated everything. I'm done, and I'm never going to see you again. And he goes. And the fact that he had dinner with Pacino or had coffee with Pacino, and he mentions that he had a girl. So but the reason they go to dinner is because they know that somebody's going to give something up, and they're going to have a strategic advantage. Well, De Niro happened to be the one that gives something up. There's a girl in his life. I got a woman.
Yep. I thought that this time too, where he spots the girl in the car sitting alone, and I was like, you told him about that.
And Michael Mann says, and what's interesting, he says that each one has a specific philosophy about life, and the outcome will lend to their specific philosophy. So, like the Val Kilmer's character believes in, he's kind of like the postmodern anarchist in the way that Michael Mann describes it, but he has a love, Charlene. The sun sets with her, man. When he says to his thing. And so his belief in her and his love in her fulfills its promise, because when he shows up, you think she's going to betray him, but ultimately Charlene still loves him and she waves him off. And that's what's so heartbreaking about the scene, is because they can be so mean to each other, but ultimately it's just two very troubled people that love each other, and she, in the end, redeems their relationship by setting him free. And, the backstory on Charlene is like she was a prostitute on the streets for many years. So there's an obsession with people that could provide safety, the materialism, and that's why she's after these guys, because she's looking for safety. But with Kilmer, it's love.
I want to stop you there to talk about Kilmer, because definitely when you were talking about who wins the movie, Pacino, De Niro, and I'm just thinking about the various tremendous performances, and I fucking always love Tom Sizemore and everything he does, and I think he deserves a nice honorable mention. But if I had to pick one person that I think steals the movie based on the screen time they get and what they do with it, I would pick Val Kilmer. Because I just think there is so much depth he gives that guy, and the friendship between him and De Niro in particular. The fact that De Niro is going to stake Ashley Judd, when he comes and confronts her because she's sleeping with Hank Azaria, and says, like, you will give him this one more chance, and if you don't, like, I will stake you. Like, the depth of that friendship, like, it doesn't get a lot of dialogue, screen time. I don't think it would have worked if you don't feel it, if the viewer doesn't feel it. And I think he really did something with that role, in spite of like what feels like 10 to 20 lines in the movie. He's not a vocal guy. And yeah, it is great lines like, the sun rises and sets with her that just make him likable, and for me made a huge standout performance.
Or empathize with him. What's interesting is you and I are both diehard Kilmer fans. Like we love us some Val Kilmer. We've talked about him many times. And we're kind of doing a shotgun blast version of this podcast because there's so many moments. Like you just brought up the moment that I completely forgot about, when he goes in, and this movie's so we're going to have to do a part 2. You got to come back for a part 2, and we'll get the things that we miss in this one. But, Kilmer, we can do our whole podcast on that character. And, I was kind of saving him, getting through the Neil McCauley. But I think Neil McCauley wins the movie. I think De Niro's his character, to me, is he kind of carries it, but Val Kilmer is the most mysterious and interesting to me, and the relationship between the two. So I just ordered the Heat 2 book for Evan and our other friend Jamie, and we're all going to read it and kind of maybe we'll come back and do a podcast on that book. But, there's no surprise that they're going to be focused around the Val Kilmer character because he was so interesting and so fascinating, and everybody walks away from that film being wanting more of that. But to go back to what you were saying, you thought that really good acting was reserved, and the reality is that if you were living the truth in fictional circumstances, like within this thing, and you have a point of view or you understand what you're thinking or what you want within a scene, it just radiates. It just comes across. So we learned so much from Val Kilmer. Like when he first shows up to buy the explosives, and he says, "Yeah, I'm blowing post holes in semen, or whatever." You're immediately like, who is this guy? I want to know more about him. Like, I want, like how many characters did that come on screen and you're just like, you haven't been drawn in yet. But if Val Kilmer comes on screen, and then every scene and every performance, and if you look at the scene when De Niro is saying that basically, we got heat on us, maybe we should walk away from the bank job, and I'm giving you the opportunity to walk away from the bank. If you look at Val Kilmer's face, it's like almost like not a father and son, but like a mentor, mentee. Mm-hmm. Like he's just like, he cares.
And when he's like, I need this. I need this. You're so right in terms of, and I think that is the essence of what I was saying for what I thought as a young person, kind of the Pacino over the top scenery chewy thing was like, what Kilmer did was just embodied it. And I understood it without even understanding that I understood it. And I just was like, I gravitate towards, I want to know more about this guy. And that explosive scene is so great. Actually, the other actor in it, I also think is kind of fantastic. And they're doing this dance a little with their eyes of like, is he looking at him? Is he suspicious of him? Val Kilmer is so kind of confident with it and ready to look at the guy. Kilmer's ready to look, and the cashier is kind of not really looking up. And there's a great tension that plays in that scene that you're like, what is this guy doing? What's going on here? Why are we watching these scenes? There also is a deleted scene that you can watch on YouTube, which is the Tom Sizemore part where he is getting, amongst other things from, a Kmart or whatever was around during that day. I don't know if Target was around yet, probably lesser, but where he's getting, amongst other things, hockey masks, which is fun. And he's talking about being like, the kids are starting hockey. Because they tried to, the intent of his scenes that didn't make the movie were like rounding out that he's a family man. Mm-hmm. But he's, I guess, a family man who's also buying things for their crime. Yeah. I thought it was a pretty good scene. I'm actually surprised it wasn't in the movie.
Yeah, you're like, I got other things that you could have cut out. Why did you get that? But again, it's a lesson in humility for me, because the more I watch that movie, the more I'm like, oh, you know what? That scene has to be there. Oh, I don't know. It's like, and you realize like, this is a master. Like, who the fuck am I to talk about this? But, yes. Again, to go back to
that goes without saying, but what else do we do other than watch these movies and talk about them and criticize them and then watch them 10,000 more times? So to be clear,
and then be like,
it, obviously,
I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. But to go back to Val Kilmer, you're right. It's confidence. Like Val Kilmer comes in and has done so much work and embodies that character. He has the confidence for you to lean in, as opposed to him leaning into you. Whereas if there's somebody that's a bit insecure about their performance, about their work, they push. They want to show you things. Look, this is me, and this is why I'm interesting, and this is what I'm, great ass, whatever. But by the way, like, we revised, knowing that he was on cocaine the whole time. If I was Pacino, like if I was an actor and I was like, okay, all right, we're going to work on this thing. We're on coke. You're going to see me do some bumps of coke and stuff like that. Then you're like, oh, he's been chipping coke the whole time. Okay, we got it. And then, oh, you know what? The coke thing didn't work. So I'm taking it. I'm like, dude, I was on cocaine the whole fucking movie. Like everybody's going to be like, what the fuck is he doing? And it's like, and Pacino said that. He goes, I want to clear the air with something. Like, I was on coke the whole goddamn time. We're doing the scene,
Was that a studio note, do you think? Was that we don't want a protagonist of the movie on cocaine?
No, I think it was a Michael Mann. Michael Mann says, he said that it became distracting, and I wanted to focus on other things, so that's not one of the things I wanted to focus on. I have pages of characters that I want to talk about. I don't think we're going to get it to on this podcast. We just scratched the surface. We have to do a part two. You got to come back and do a part 2. You're like, damn it, Wes, I got kids. I got to work full time.
I mean, look, as I said, I just wanted to come on and not embarrass myself or you. So the fact that I'm coming back for a part 2 is double the honor. So,
bro, you're gonna be.
I'm happy to do it. Come on.
Yeah, and then we're gonna do a fun one. You know what we should do? Show them the poster. Show all the listeners the poster behind you with Luke Skywalker, Mark Hamill. We should do the poster behind you, Evan.
Oh, me show you.
Yeah. So we should do, what is it called?
Corvette Summer.
Corvette Summer. I've never seen this movie. Joseph, you seen this movie?
Yes, I have seen it.
Okay.
I loved it. I haven't seen it in probably...
It is free to watch on YouTube.
Oh,
okay.
That's where I most recently watched it.
So I'm so ashamed that there's a Mark Hamill movie that I haven't seen, especially in that time period. I never even heard of this movie. I haven't even seen a trailer for it. So we should, maybe partake in some relaxants and
that
come
should be
and do
the
that
mushroom
movie.
one. Yeah, that should be the mushroom one.
Okay, Joseph. Simply the best, better than all the rest.
damn right.
Evan's like, dude, I didn't know you could fucking sing like a sparrow.
Alrighty, so we have simply the best. I think we will all come to agreement on most of these.
Okay.
So we do have one thing. I hope you know what a Chad is, Evan. Right? A Karen and a Chad. Right?
I think I can intuit.
So who was the best Chad? Waingro or Robert Van Zant?
It's not. So Waingro wouldn't be in the category.
Really?
Yeah. No.
So it's got to be
Van Sant is like the descript. That is Chad. That is what Chad is.
There is the detective. There is another Chad in this movie that I would insert. The detective who gets shot in the arm, where Pacino basically says to him at the end of the call, he goes, "You doing okay?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "I'll live," and he just hangs up on him basically. So he's like, I kind of care, but I don't.
Dude,
in such a great way. That guy is Chad.
Yeah,
as far as I know, That's Chad.
And he has a great Chad haircut. And Chad
That's
blue
what I'm
eyes.
saying. Like he looks. That is Chad.
Hey, no. Wait. There is a low rent Chad that I think wins the Chad battle.
Wait. I was going to do another question. Who was the most worthless
stop.
cop?
No. There is a low rent Chad, and it is the diner owner, the manager, who is giving Haysbert a hard time. He's like,
that is a good low rent.
He's like, can I get my break? He's like, so and so called out, so take out the garbage and do this. You'll take a break later. I hated that guy. That guy. So he's so because he's so good. I mean, that guy is like embodying that character. That is you know exactly who that asshole is, and you fucking hate him. So we got low rent Chad and we got high rent Chad, and the reason that guy works so well as low rent Chad is because it makes you empathize with Dennis Haysbert so strongly.
I know we have a couple good Chads, but is Pacino possibly a Chad? Is there any room for Pacino as a Chad? Like he's got the hair, he's got the blow dried hair.
Dude, he's got the blow dried hair. He's got the tan. He's got the suit.
Coke. He's the Coke Chad.
Look at the house he lives in. That Michael Mann design with the smoky glass window cube things. That like 80s style. There's some Chad stuff there.
There is some Chad, and when he's like, what's the guy's name where he's like, "Shut up, Richard." When he's like, and he goes, "You're not gonna watch my TV set." Like taking the thing, "You will not watch my TV set." Like that was great, Chad. Man, shut up, Richard.
He just litters on the street. He kicks out his TV. Like that's a Chad move.
Dude, is Pacino the Chad of the movie? Oh my God. Be. Chad loves Coke too. Those the yuppies, frat Coke. Boys. They love Cokes.
Okay, so Pacino for the win.
You know what? I can't do that, Pacino. I can't do it.
You can't do it to him. Okay. Well, honorable mention for him.
Okay.
Well, let's give it to that cop. That cop, he's the true Chad. He's blonde. He's got the pompadour.
We can give it to the cop because he deserves something for all that hard work, and he's probably never been. He got shot, and he's probably never been singled out in the Heat universe.
Okay, so who had the best death? Waingro, Van Zant, or Trejo?
Waingro.
Not Trejo?
So I think the most satisfying killing.
Oh yeah,
was
satisfying.
Wango when he's like, "Look at me in the eye, look me in the eyes, look me in the eyes." I was like, "Fuck yeah, man!" So I would say that Wango to me, but it depends on what you mean because Trejo like that.
Yeah, that was emotional, and then you had
it's the most dramatic. Yeah,
Dude, I got teary eyed when he says, "Where's my wife?" And he's like, "She's gone." And you just hear, you don't see anything, but you just hear like the pain come out of his mouth. Oh God, that was so good. So, do you mean by like best death, like because
it's whatever you define it? What is the best death for you?
I think I think him killing Waingro is like one of my favorite killing scenes in.
What would you give
movie.
Honorable mention though? Van Sant or Trejo?
Trejo. Oh, Van Sant was very sad.
I loved it though. He's just like, the hell did I know?
But the thing that Van Sant, the thing that I couldn't understand is like this guy's been living in his office for like 2 weeks surrounded by bodyguards. And then he's like, all right, I'm going to go home and watch the basketball game. And there's nobody guarding me or like nobody in the house. And then he shows up. But the
important correction, hockey game. He was watching hockey.
Oh, hockey. Sorry, hockey. But
that's
Waingro,
very important. It's a very important distinction for no reason.
Right. You're right. But Waingro, but see, basketball would be more chattish and hockey's less chattish. But Waingro, because when I first saw it, I was like, the fact that he's a serial killer, I think is fascinating to me, but it makes you really want him to die. So when De Niro is on the way there and he's making the choice, you're conflicted because you're like, don't do it, De Niro. Don't violate your thing. It's going to be the end of you and you're rooting for him. But then you're like, but fuck that guy. He betrayed you and he fucking kills people, And so then when he shows up and he's like, look me in the eye, look me in the eye. And you think about all that poor lady that he killed in the hotel room. And you think about, the way that he betrayed them, the way that he fucked them over. So it's such a powerful scene.
That actor is fantastic who plays him too. And apparently he actually went to prison more recently and they referred to him as Waingro inside the prison. Yeah. Which is pretty insane. And another little factoid on that would be that Ted Levine, who most people remember for his he-she in Silence of the Lambs, put the lotion in the basket. That I think he was offered the role. He was offered the Waingro role and was like, I don't think I can play another one of these creepy dudes again, without people thinking I am that creepy dude. So he became the police guy that gets killed pretty brutally.
I think Waingro is fantastic, dude. We could have a podcast on each character in this, but him as a character and then his performance. And the way that, I think he was fantastic in it. And by the way, when he was in prison, they only called him Waingro. Nobody called him by his name. They just call him that Waingro thing.
There's two scenes, and you already pretty much singled it out, but best scene, diner or the shootout? Got to pick it.
You would have to do categories.
Oh, no.
Because the shootout's action scene.
Best.
And I want, to me, so what makes Michael Mann all the way back to Miami Vice is he has so much style, but it's effortless, right? It doesn't, if you think about Manhunter, there's a style to it, but it's effortless and it flows with it. And it does, this movie, nothing about it, and I'm trying to think about it, aged badly to me. It affected me as if when I first saw it for the first time, and there's a hyper realism to it. And what's interesting is people will say negative things about the shootout, come on, downtown LA, these guys with assault weapons.
Who has ever said anything negative about that shootout?
What they say negative is the logic that you could be in downtown LA, have a 30-minute shootout, and then get in a station wagon and make it out of there. They say that it'd be surrounded and everything like that. That nobody talks about how, it's brilliant. Nobody denies that it's brilliant, but they're saying logically, how do you have a 30-minute shootout with no helicopters and no, nobody's there or anything surrounding them? But what Michael Mann says is that cops are usually the overwhelming force, and that's the bulk of their experience. And rarely do they have somebody attacking them and attacking them smartly and effectively with high-powered weapons. And so what it did is it put the cops flat-footed, and with the way they came at them, attacked them. And so then now when you see that logic is great. So, man, that is tough. I would have to say the greatest shootout in the movie
greatest shootout
is that, and then the greatest dramatic scene is that.
Okay. Well, then, fine. You have to give me the best line. Okay. If you feel the heat around the corner, because she's got a great ass, or because the man, this is a dead line because the man on the other end is already dead.
Oh God, that's one of my favorites.
Oh,
I'm talking
good.
to
That's a great one. And what I love about the scene, which I never noticed till this most recent watch, is that they're just in a random fucking kitchen. They're just in a random kitchen. Val Kilmer, like the kitchen of a restaurant. Like they just went to a restaurant, went in the kitchen, and Val Kilmer is smoking in the fucking restaurant. Like I know it's the 90s, I know it's pre like some smoking laws, but they just like walked into someone's kitchen to make this call. I mean, it's fantastic.
Yep. Alrighty. Best use of a prop.
It's
got to be the TV.
TV, yeah.
The TV.
You can ball my wife,
yeah,
but you will not.
You can
ball. And I love the actor though. I forget his name. I follow him on Twitter, but he like always would play those. He was the stepdad in T2. He's
I was wondering what he was from. That's right. Yeah,
he always
T2.
plays that character like on 24. He's like, you hate him, and then finally he has a redeeming arc at the end, and you're like, oh. But yeah, he's always great as the Chad. Also,
which guy?
The guy who's having the affair.
Having the affair.
De Niro's wife.
That guy. Hey, I actually want to retract that because the weapons handling and heat changed the way. So Val Kilmer's the way he loads, the way they check the way they check their bullets, so they pull the top back and they come down. It changed the way it upped the game for all movies after that because all movies after that were like the freeze, like Dirty Harry, where it's like his hand is bent like this and they shoot and everything like that. Their weapons handling was like unlike anything I've ever seen in television before. And so, I would say, like in that shootout, the way that he spins and takes out the magazine, puts back in, like it's so professional, so well done.
Apparently it's used in like police training and military training. That whole sequence, the gunfight, is used as how you retreat while under fire.
Oh wow! So
and that moment that like how Val Kilmer loads that weapon is specifically cited as like this is how you do that. I mean, it is that authentic that is shown to police, to military units.
Well, then we have to use that. Then
I think it's kind of obvious. Who had the best performance in the film? De Niro.
For me, the award for best actor is De Niro, and then best supporting I'd give to Kilmer.
By the way. 0 Oscars for this movie.
Wow.
0 Oscars for the movie. Are you crazy kidding me? All right, go ahead. What's the next one?
What's your answer to that, Wes? Sorry.
Well, I said earlier, I thought it was De Niro.
But best supporting Val?
Best supporting Val.
Yeah.
But dude, I got to say, Michael T. Williamson, like when we come back for the next thing, I want to talk about him. Now, he did Forrest Gump before this, so that this wouldn't be breakout for him. But there's so many wonderful performances. I mean, people are just this is an embarrassment of riches with performances in this. But when he's talking to Ashley Judd and talking about the future of her son and what he's trying to convince her to do, he is superb. I mean, just terrific work. And I've always liked him. There is an integrity and like a weight to him, and he's always honest. I believe every word that comes out of his mouth. And he's firing on all cylinders in this movie. He's so good in it.
I like the way he's defensive of Ashley Judd, too, in those scenes that Hank Azaria is kind of talking disrespectfully, and he is very quick to intercede with that.
That's a good note, Evan. That's a good, because thinking back like he was protective of her. You could tell he cared about her.
Even if that was sort of to gain her trust for what he was about to ask, I think there's probably levels of it that you could investigate. But
I don't think it would be as effective. Like if him as an actor was playing like it was like, I think if him as an actor was having the choice that I'm trying to win her over because he's too honest and authentic in the thing. He just tells the truth, and he's
I think you're right.
So
it's not like he likes Hank Azaria. You know what I mean? So I think he's more than happy to put him in his place.
All right, go to best breakout.
Yeah, best breakout performance: Robert Fincher, Amy Brenneman, and Ashley Judd.
Did Amy Brenneman was this? This was obviously before judging Amy.
This was her first big role. Yeah. She had another movie the same year. It was with Paul Reiser. It was like a lesser known comedy.
Well, I could tell you what popped for me is Ashley Judd, because this is the first time I saw her, and she just kind of has this presence that's just powerful on screen.
That lesser known Amy Brenneman movie is Bye Bye Love, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I love Bye Bye Love. It's a great, fun movie. I believe also Eliza Dushku's first movie, and she's great in it. I do want to, one of the things I really wanted to talk about and ask you, Wes, as an actor specifically, was, did I miss Amy Brenneman in the first scene is a very heavy Southern accent that mostly disappears? Did I catch that right?
No, you did catch that. And I love, my favorite thing about that scene is he's like, where you from? And she's like, goes into her lineage, like, we're from, it's Scottish, and then Scott Irish, and then, then from my family hails from Appalachia. And then she's like, where you from? Bay Area. Just one word, Bay Area. After he cussed her out for interrupting him reading his book. But Dennis Haysbert. You forgot about Dennis Haysbert.
Also, Major League existed, and that is definitely a breakout for Dennis Haysbert.
What about Kevin Gage? Did he do anything? Because I know he did Aaron Brockovich after this. Did he do anything? Wayne Grove. Did he do anything before this? Because this is the first time I saw him.
Did it really launch a huge career?
Well, I think breakout means now they're in your zeitgeist and you know who they are. So if you ever saw this guy again,
get in there? Because was this one of his first things?
No, Trejo was already
mainstream though.
He was like, you knew who Trejo was when you were watching this movie.
What about Portman? I mean, she had done The Professional,
Professional was huge launching pad.
Yeah.
Okay.
A breakout.
I just think this is kind of like, this woman is continuing to do excellent work with excellent filmmakers.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was not her first.
I take breakout, and breakout can be personal, whereas like when it broke out into your radar, and then you then knew who they were and recognized them in films after that. And so for me, I didn't know who Ashley Judd was. I saw this film and then I recognized her and everything. That's the lady from Heat. Same with Kevin Gage for me. And Amy Brenneman. Amy Brenneman.
What year was Time to Kill? Is that before or after this? I asked for Ashley Judd purposes. It's got to be close. It's got to be within a year or two, one way or the other.
96.
Okay, so that's a year after.
Yeah, after. That was good, Ash. That was Ashley in her ascent.
Yeah.
Her ascent into.
That's Joel Schumacher shooting the shit out of Ashley Judd for sure. She looked.
And McConaughey.
She was glowing. And McConaughey. Oh man, he was in love with McConaughey.
Yeah, Cameron. All right. Cameron loved him. Okay, any more? Oh, we didn't choose. Let's just give it to Ashley Judd.
I agree. And that's the last one.
Okay, and then our top 5 when we come back and we do part 2 is our top 5 Michael Mann movies.
Yep.
All right, guys. Thank you for hanging out. This was a good time. Thank you, Evan, I know you're busy. You got two beautiful little boys. You're running around. You got a lot going on. You're a professional in-demand screenwriter. Thank you for donating your time to come hang out with us, chumps. And thank you, listeners, for coming to hang out with us and talk about Heat. We're going to come back with a part 2, and hope to see you soon. Say goodbye, Evan.
Thanks for having me, Wes. This was a blast. It flew, and I look forward to part 2 myself.
All right.